Okay, well, good morning, everyone. Let's get started. I guess we just turned the corner into the afternoon. Um, Welcome to the UC Center Sacramento Speaker Series. I'm Richard Kravitz, the director here. Um, Before we get started with today's event, just a couple of brief announcements. Next week, we'll welcome UC President Michael Drake for a wide-ranging Q&A session, largely fueled by you, the audience. As most of you know, Dr. Drake's an ophthalmologist, former chancellor at UC Irvine, and former president of the Ohio State University. So he'll be well equipped to discuss a wide range of topics, extending from diversity and free speech to reopening the campuses after COVID. After that, we'll then have our quarter break, but we will resume on June 23rd with a talk entitled Looking into the Educational Mirror, Ways to Promote Validating Practices in Education for Latino Students. So now for today. The COVID-19 pandemic has introduced stressors into all of our lives, obviously. One of the groups whose lives have been most disrupted are America's teenagers. We're pleased to welcome our special guests, Tim Kendall and Laura Morris. But first, to put the event in context and to tell you more about our speakers, I'd like to introduce Paul Hastings. Paul Hastings is professor of psychology at UC Davis, where he also served as chair of psychology and interim dean of the School of Education. He completed his BS at McGill University and his PhD at the University of Toronto. He's a member of the UC Consortium on the Developmental Science of Adolescence, the Center for Poverty Research, and the Center for Mind and Brain, where he directs the Healthy Emotions, Relationships, and Development Laboratory. Professor Hastings is both deeply knowledgeable of and deeply committed to healthy adolescent development, and I'm very pleased to welcome him back to UCCS to help monitor this session. So Paul, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Richard, for that gracious introduction. And thanks as well to you and the team at UC Center Sacramento for hosting and coordinating this important event. I've really been looking forward to today's speaker series session on social media and the mental health of teenagers during the COVID-19 pandemic. Collectively, we've all been hearing about how the state's children, youth, and families have been affected by remote learning, remote work, social distancing, and the other consequences of the public health efforts to stem the spread of the pandemic. This is a topic that I and many of my colleagues across the UC system have been researching, but even while we're still trying to understand the breadth and the nature of these impacts, it's critical to be working towards mitigating and redressing any of those adverse impacts. And today we're fortunate to be hearing from and talking with two experts who have been deeply engaged in that important work. Tim Kendall is the CEO of Moment, a technology holding company that builds and invests in companies that embody tech for good. Moment primarily focuses on preventative health, mental health, and next generation consumer businesses. Formerly, Tim was the president of Pinterest. At various points, he led product development, engineering, marketing, and sales. And prior to Pinterest, Tim was Facebook's director of monetization, where he led the development of Facebook's advertising business. Tim serves on the boards of UCSF Benioff Children's Hospital, where he's recently focused on their mental health strategy. Prior to this, he earned his engineering degree and MBA from Stanford University. We'll be hearing from Tim first. After Tim, we're going to hear from Laura Sanders Morris, who is the Director of Policy and Programs at the California Partners Project, which has the missions of advancing gender equity within the state and promoting the betterment of children's lives as a primary focus of media and technology industries. Laura brings years of experience designing and leading programs on mediation and conflict resolution, team building and visioning, working towards socially responsible outcomes, and maintaining a strong commitment toward children, gender, and race equity throughout these efforts. She has collaborated with and advised leaders of such companies as Disney, Nike, Time Warner, and Meridian Health, as well as nonprofit organizations. And she has served on numerous advisory boards, including Step Up Women's Network and the Maui School. Laura earned her bachelor's degree at the Newhouse School of Public Communications at Syracuse University. And in addition to her diverse portfolio of work, she's currently conducting research on parents' equity and online learning while pursuing her doctorate degree in education leadership at St. Mary's Kamenovitz School of Education. After we hear from Tim and then Laura, we're going to have a discussion period. I'll ask you to please enter your questions and comments into the chat function at any time throughout the session. After we hear from the speakers, the UCCS team and I will present your questions and comments to Laura and Tim for discussion. With that, please join me in welcoming Tim Kendall.
Thank you, Paul. Thrilled to be a part of this event. Also want to thank California Partners Project. I'm an advisor to them and work with that organization, and I'm really excited about the report that they put out that Laura's going to talk more about. So Paul talked about what moment is, and that's where I spend my time today. We're really focused on trying to get technology back on your side, because today our view is that it largely works against you, works against us. I'd say another way of saying that is, how can we use technology to help you make decisions in the short term that are aligned with sort of the person you want to be in the medium and long term? How do we sort of use technology to help you get out of your own way? And that's what I'm really passionate about. And it's actually something that technology, I think, is uniquely suited to if it is built and applied correctly. So let me talk a little bit about how I came to work on this approach and how it relates to technology use and what we're seeing with youth. I was in tech, as Paul talked about. I worked at Facebook and helped create and build out their business model, and then worked at Pinterest for many years. And what I started to notice when I was at Pinterest was just the degree to which my phone was kind of taking over my life. I was starting to really lose my own agency. I would get on to services like a YouTube or an Instagram or Pinterest, and with the intention of, look, I might even get on my phone just with the intention of checking a text message. And 30 minutes later, I realized that I can't account for the last 30 minutes of time. I don't actually feel that great physiologically and mentally, and lo and behold, I've sort of lost control, and quite a bit of experience with addiction in my family. And I started to notice some of the things that I was doing, like having shame around how I used my phone, hiding my phone usage from time to time. They're classic behaviors that we associate with classic substance addiction. And my view is, if you're doing anything that brings up shame or that you feel like you want to hide from certain people in your life, that is a flag in my mind that not necessarily that you are quote unquote addicted, but it's certainly a flag that there's something to examine in terms of your relationship with that thing. And so that's what really prompted me to start working on this issue, which is this idea of kind of using technology to help people get agency back over their phone, and this sort of broader remit around technology for good. I also was part of this film, The Social Dilemma, which really tried to paint and portray this issue that we're having with social media. And in particular, we really have an issue in terms of their business model, and their business model being fundamentally misaligned with the interests of its end user. And so in the last few years, kind of in the midst of participating in this film, I came to this realization that, oh, wow, like in the same way that we have been, in a way, our culture has been kind of raked over the coals by all the different big industries. So there was big tobacco, there's big oil, there's big food, there's big pharma, there's big sugar. I think these are all instances of industries that have exploited us and exploited our our willpower and preyed upon our prefrontal cortex to make decisions that are not necessarily in our long-term best interest, but make decisions that feel good to us in the short term and are good for those industries. And what I came to realize was that there is a new big out there, and it is big social. And I think the only way that we get to a point where big social doesn't wreak the same kind of havoc that these other big industries have already wreaked on our culture and on us as individuals is that we have to get them and our government to have a reckoning around the nature of this business model and realize that it's fundamentally an extraction-based business model. It's really forcing people to mortgage their futures, and it's happening right under their noses. Let me talk a little bit about how I sort of view the nature of social media and the progression that I've seen in terms of its addictiveness. When I was at Facebook, the things that we used, which were absolutely addictive, the things that we used to try to get people to spend more and more time on the service were, classic kind of social vulnerabilities. So your sensitivity to comparison, your sensitivity and need for validation. We're human beings, we're proud of who we are. And we're very triggered by any threats to that. So, or anything that sort of affirms who we are, or things that disaffirm who we are. And then we started to also prey upon this notion of, and people talk about this with Facebook even today, this fear of missing something. So all of a sudden I knew about all of these things happening around me in a way that I didn't before. And it became readily apparent when I was not a part of them, which became very triggering and also really reinforced this feedback loop of wanting to go back again and again and again to the service. We're now in a newer era of social media where now we're relying on, the companies are relying on, I would argue, even more pernicious ingredients. So hate speech, violence, conspiracy theories, and this very notion of trying to divide groups of people. It turns out that that's very good business, because the degree that I can get more dug in on my view and more convinced that the other is wrong, I'm all the more interested in finding more information that affirms my view and more information that proves that the other is wrong. And that ends up being really good for business. The impact on the youth is something that we're still in the process of trying to understand, but there are some clear studies that link the magnitude of social media usage with degrees of depression and anxiety. There also are studies that show magnitude of social media being linked to, in teenagers, thinning in the prefrontal cortex. And finally, there's another brain study that shows that, again, magnitude of social media usage is linked to the reduction of gray matter in the amygdala. And the amygdala is kind of that sort of fight or flight part of the brain, the animalistic part of the brain, that aspects of which are actually getting eroded by usage of social media. Interestingly, they see the same erosion of the gray matter in the amygdala in cocaine addicts. I often get asked the question, well, sort of what do we do? I think that Laura's going to talk a little bit about some best practices that I think are terrific. I'm excited to hear. I would say a couple things. One is that there are some frameworks out there that allow groups of people, and I think this is a group problem, it's a network problem, but there are frameworks out there that allow groups of people to opt into a different way, especially for young people. So there's a framework called Wait Until 8th that allows parents of kids in the same class to co-commit to not giving their kids smartphones until they're roughly 14 years old. it's not a sure thing. And the folks that I know who've tried that have not always been able to get 100% commitment, but a partial commitment is probably better than no commitment. The other piece of advice, which is often unpopular when I tell parents this, but I recommend that parents look at their own usage and remind themselves how powerful modeling is. And to underscore that point, if you ask adults whether or not they think that it's important that kids wear helmets when they bike, 90% of adults will say yes. And if you ask the adults, well, how many of you wear helmets when you are on your bike? It's about 25% who wear helmets consistently. And so what percentage of children wear helmets? About 40%. If you look at seatbelts as an obvious contrast, right? It's like 99% think it's important, 99% of parents do it, while 99% of children do it. Modeling is a very powerful thing. And so when we have seen at moment in our work on device usage, families make systemic changes, it's when the whole family makes a change. And in fact, this is very consistent with the work that's done on families with children who are diabetic, which is that if they really want to change the lifestyle and how the child eats and consumes food, the whole family has to change, or else it will not create enduring change. I think the final thing that I'll say is co-creating as a family limits. So one of the best practices that we hear about is, hey, let's have a rule that we don't have our phones at the dinner table ever. Let's have a rule or a norm that we are not on our phones from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. And then another rule, which is basically after 9 p.m., we don't have our mobile devices in our bedroom. Setting norms and rules like that can really move the usage patterns for kids and for families as a whole. Yeah, that's the end of my prepared remarks. Eager to hear what Laura has to say. I got a little bit of a preview, and I don't want to steal her thunder, but there are some best practices that she'll share, and they're best practices, I believe, for kids. I would note that I think they're also wonderful best practices for parents as well. And that I think to the degree that we want our kids to change along the lines of what Laura's suggesting, we have to have our own reckoning as adults as well.
We can't hear you, Ms. Sanders Morris.
I'm unmuted.
Perfect.
Yeah, thank you. A pleasure to be here with all of you, and thank you, Tim, also for sharing how insightful this report, Are the Kids All Right, has been for us as a team, as parents, but wanting to extend to parents in California. Part of our mission around this report, we know that parents are distracted and caregivers have been distracted during this pandemic. And it has been difficult for parents to accurately assess how their teens are doing. Everyone is just juggling online work, online schooling, and worrying about their health and even loved ones. And it's a great deal for parents to manage what is going on. And we understood that as a challenge. And the first partner, our founders of the organization, also felt there was not one more thing we could ask parents to do. And so that is also why we created in this report an expanded toolkit, which has some suggestions for best practices. If you could advance to the next slide. Quantitative research, I want to talk about that first, because before we conducted our report, there were studies that were coming out, quantitative studies and research. Ours is one of the first qualitative ones, and we launched at the end of November on the Today Show with our report. But a few, the quantitative research The surveys since the onset of COVID, and there's been some changes, 52% of respondents ages 18 to 29 nationwide report signs of depression or anxiety. In California, 37% of all respondents in the CDC survey reports signs of depression or anxiety. Compared with 2019, in 2020, the percentage of ER visits by youth for mental health reasons increased 24% for children aged 5 to 11 and 31% for youth aged 12 to 17. The visits were more common among females than males. 95% of youth report using social media, and 25% of 14 to 22-year-olds on social media almost constantly. And now the qualitative research. With our CPP, that's the California Partners Project, as we mentioned, and CMI is the Child Mind Institute. We collaborated with them, and Dr. Harold Kopowitz, who's well known for his work around children and teens and depression, anxiety, worked with us. And we conducted 46 in-depth interviews for kids ages 14 to 17. We wanted to go a little bit deeper than what we were seeing with the quantitative research. We wanted to hear from a diverse group of teens in the state of California what they were experiencing. We had anecdotally heard other parents talking, but we wanted to really understand what was going on. Week-long diary responses from teens and parents were conducted, documenting their daily habits like sleep and exercise and internet use and mood. And that was very interesting for us because the parents had one idea. They thought their kids were maybe 4 or 5 hours. And in fact, it was more like 16 hours a day. Diverse population, as we mentioned, the socioeconomic, race, ethnicity, gender identity, and location. And our respondents included 14 teens with a diagnosed mental health condition. And interestingly so, the teens who had already been going through therapy, they seem to have had a different way of managing this depression. They had their own tools that they had been developing and their own mental health kit. And so their responses were different. One of the responses, in fact, was, one of the teens understood that they were on so long that they knew they had to pull themselves off, and they started self-regulating themselves and going outside. And their behavior was consistently different, those who had undergone therapy advanced. So our key findings, moving from the quantitative numbers to the qualitative experiences, what we were able to see is that this looked like the signs of grief. We had students and teens for the very first time have this experience of a great deal of loss and anger. We had students who, that were athletes and could never envision themselves not playing sports, and here they were home all day long. Or the teens who had finally gotten up the courage and had become their, an actor in their school play. Proms, graduations, all of this very deep and significant losses, particularly during a time where teens are developing their identity. And so the need to turn to social media and social needs was most definitely there. And using tech as a sedative, we heard over and over again that the teens would begin with online learning. So they're on that for maybe 5-6 hours, get a little break, have something to eat, then come right back on, play games, or scroll all day on their TikTok or Instagram, and 6, 7, 8, 9 hours. And then to come down off of this, what they often refer to as like, well, to get myself to sleep, I had to watch Netflix. And so now we're looking at a whole day. I mean, I remember one young woman said, she fell asleep on her phone and hit her on the head. And so this negative impact of seeing tech as also a sedative. We saw that throughout. So creating these mental toolkits, we saw, again, the students who had some experience with therapy managed to create these ways of regulating themselves. What was also very telling for us is that, the CDC says 1 hour of movement, 60 minutes, everyone should move a day. Well, that's a challenge for many, many families and many young people. They may not have the opportunity to go out. Right now we're conducting a listening tour, and, in different parts of California, not everyone has a backyard. Some of our teens are living in urban environments, and they're not able to go outside. But what we did find is that 65% of the teens were not moving at all. And the sleep patterns had been dramatically disrupted. They're staying on the phone. They're using it as a sedative. There's not a regular sleep pattern. Advance, please. So when we talk about the sleep, because we decided to create this toolkit that we could share, and we're going to share it with you all after this talk. And our idea was to make sure that we had practices for teens as well as the parents, because you know what, we know that we are all in this together, and it is very difficult to separate both of them. But the majority of teens reported to us that they had sleep patterns. As I mentioned, the CDC reports that nearly 3/4 of teens do not get the recommended 9 hours of sleep. We spoke with Dr. Matt Walker from University California, Berkeley, who is a sleep expert. He's often called the sleep diplomat. And he has given us advice, and we'll continue hopefully to work with him around sleep, excuse me, and the significance of this loss. Sleep in a regular pattern. So the chronic sleep loss among teens, it raises the risk for depression, anxiety, hopelessness, impulsivity, and suicidal ideation. What Dr. Walker shared with us also that parents care about too is the academic achievement. If you're not getting a good night's sleep, it is highly likely that you're not going to perform well in school. So your academic achievement is decreasing, as well as for athletes who, if they're not getting enough sleep, it's not just about the growth, but their strength, and it impacts the way they eat, the way they sleep. Next slide, please. So sleep is a major pillar of our toolkit. There are 3 of them: sleep, mindfulness, and movement. So supporting better sleep habits, what we see as a practice that can be helpful. Aim for regular bedtimes, even on the weekends. And I know how hard that is. I'm a mom. No caffeine within 4 hours of bedtime or eating large meals late in the evening. Commit to screen-free time, especially within an hour of bedtime, and device-free zones. Achieving a good night's sleep and daily exercise, they're interconnected. 10 minutes a day even to be able to just get moving and move outside can make a big difference. And we recognize also that, it is easier to have these regular bedtimes when children are younger. And when you're moving into teens, that can be a challenge for parents. So physical activity. As I mentioned, 65% of teens are not moving at all. And the teens should, again, have 1 hour of moderate exercise. In our expanded toolkit that you'll receive, we did some research with YouTube to find what can we provide for parents in California that is free for them. Because again, we wanted to be mindful of the diversity, socioeconomic diversity. Not everyone has access to a gym. And so these videos that we selected were from dancing from country western to hip hop to reggae, you name it, we have it for parents and teens to just maybe have a social dance party at home, something you haven't done in a while that can also be uplifting. Advance, please. And mindfulness. This was very important to put into our toolkit. Dr. Kopowitz, who again with the Child Mind Institute, really felt that we are at the beginnings of what we're seeing in terms of how to help our teens and children get out of this kind of depression and a new way of being. It's not over yet. And so developing a practice of mindfulness can can be very helpful to the parents, the teens, and thinking about your feelings while you're using tech. Begin to ask your teens, what are you feeling? And share your ideas. Share how you feel with this around tech as well. Because when we are models, Tim mentioned that, we are the role models. And it's very difficult to ask our children to do something when we are, in the balcony pretending we're not using the tech, when we know we're on it all day long as well. So maybe sharing those feelings. And do a mindful reality check. Is tech the best way to improve your mood? And think about that. I know for me, when my kids, when we go outside just to get fresh air, it just changes our mindset. So using technology to track your screen time and find meditation apps, Calm, Headspace, all of those. Take breaks from your tech to do other activities. We had several young students. I mean, the silver lining is we had students and teens who also talked about they tried activities they had never tried before. They never saw themselves as someone who could run or saw that walking might be a sport, never even thought about it. So there were some silver linings. And so we want to support parents and teens with thinking about what is it that you haven't done before that might be a new practice, yoga, etc. Next advance, please. So this is our California Partners Project. Please, report, Are the Kids All Right? Please come to our website. Here's our website address, and we will share that report with you. But I'm also going to make sure that you have an opportunity to, we'll send out that expanded toolkit. That's it.
Thank you, Laura.